What's up, fam? Welcome to another edition of God Dreamers. I am so excited that you guys are here with us today. And today I have another special guest. We're going to be talking about podcasting. This is the kind of area that I've been just recently kind of dabbling into and growing and learning more about. But today we're going to be with an expert. So he's going to kind of school me and school us on how to get started with the podcast. So today's special guest is Lloyd George. Lloyd, man, thank you so much for being on God Dreamers.
Todd, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I've watched some of your previous content, so excited to be chatting with you today.
Man, it's awesome, man. I'm glad that we were able to make this happen. I know you've just recently moved to DC, so I know you're trying to get settled down and so forth. And so thank you for just taking the time out today.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So Lloyd, you are a project manager by day and a content creator by night. So you kind of have this dual purpose, almost like this Clark Kent Superman type thing, man. What's up with that, man? What's up with that?
That's a great, and that, I'm going to steal that. And every time people ask me, that's exactly what I'm going to say. I find that, a lot of people are in a similar position to me, and a lot of like my community, they have day jobs, and then on the side, they're trying to do their content creation thing. But what I don't think enough people do is think about like, hey, how can my day job actually help like my side job? And so in my case, I'm a project manager. And so I find that when it comes to like podcasting, creating TikTok videos, I'm very organized. I like structure. I use like my project plans from work to create my content and organize it. So I'm sort of now in a place where I'm trying to make the two marry each other, right? This idea of like a project manager and some of the values and benefits of that, but also a content creator and how I can make the two work together versus viewing them as two separate things. Like, this is what I do by day and this is what I do by night. And so that's kind of where I am now.
Ah, okay. So there's some rhyme to the reason then.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're definitely organized. I was thinking as we were corresponding on planning this interview, I was like, man, he's got all these things, these little tools and stuff. I need to talk to you about that because I need to get a little bit better at using some of these tools and make things more efficient. Because sometimes I kind of struggle. I'm kind of the old school kind of person, writing things down on paper and not really utilizing the tools that are out there. So I definitely want to talk to you more about that. And I think you'll share a little bit about that as we kind of move further on into the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that that's one thing that's helped with content, that I think more people would do it if they had like a system that would make it easier to do. So if it's going to take you 7 minutes to set up before you start recording, you're more likely to start recording if it takes you 60 seconds to set up and start recording. And so those systems make a huge difference. And we'll talk about that in a second too.
Yeah, so true, so true. So first big question for you. Who is Lloyd George? Who are you, man? Can you share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. So my name obviously is Lloyd. I was originally born in a country called Zimbabwe. I've been in the United States for the last 16 years. At first, I lived in Atlanta, and that's where I've been for the last 15 of those 16 years. Really, 16 of those 16 years I've been in Atlanta and now in DC. I like to think of myself as a connector of people. So I love building authentic relationships and connecting people. Sometimes that's as simple as just like, hey, Todd, I know you and you have a podcast, and I know someone else that would be a great guest for your podcast. But other times it's creating content online, right? And taking this information and saying, hey, I just created a video teaching people how to start their first podcast. I got the information from here, and I know the group of people that I'm speaking to would never have access to this information. And so I'm sort of like the bridge between those two people. And so I like to think of myself as a connector of people. And I think that fits into sort of like my overall God plan, right? Like I think about the fact that we're all just one relationship. We're all just one conversation away from like our lives being completely different. And so when God wants to do something amazing in your life, right, just meeting that one person or that next person or getting that introduction, that could be the catalyst for the thing that just like changes everything. And so I like to think of myself as a gateway. And I feel like that's sort of like what gives me fulfillment, excitement, and joy.
That's cool, man. So Zimbabwe. So share a little bit about that transition, because I would imagine, coming from Zimbabwe to the United States was kind of would imagine an interesting cultural
Yeah.
shift. What was that like?
Yeah, I knew when we got out here, we would have so much to talk about because I know some of your family is also in the Bahamas. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay,
yeah.
okay. So yeah, you know all about it. So, a lot of my family, just due to the political landscape in Zimbabwe, a lot of my family is decentralized across the globe, from South Africa, Australia, England, Switzerland, just anywhere you could think of. But the first about 12 years of my life were spent in Zimbabwe with some of my closest family members, and there's not too much I remember about being there, except for the fact that life was very simple and very easy. And as a kid, not much I had to worry about. And I remember just sort of like at that specific time, even since I was a kid, all we would talk about in my family is like, one day we're gonna be in like America.
Oh, wow.
One day we're gonna be in America. And it almost became this saying that I felt like, you know, almost became not real because we said it so much that it just became
Wow.
something we would just like say, like, one day we'll be in America. And we never had like a plan. We didn't have like, we're gonna get like this visa, then this day we're gonna buy the tickets. It was just like something we would just like throw out there. And I remember one day, 2005-ish, I was about the fourth grade, and I remember my mom just saying, "We bought the tickets. In 3 months, we're going to be going to America." And
Wow.
that's when it kind of hit me that like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this is actually happening. And it's not that necessarily that I didn't love my country per se, but I just
Yeah.
think that it felt like to me that like, okay, like there was a sense of hope that came with knowing that we were going to like leave, and I'm not exactly sure why, but this idea of being able to come to America has changed my life. I'm a kid with no college degree, and the fact that I'm able to get a job here, I'm able to do a lot of things, is just it says a lot about the country in itself. And I am
Mhm.
optimistic that one day I'll be able to go back home and help some of the people there.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I think a lot of us that have lived in outside of the country, we see the United States as a land of opportunity, and I think and sometimes we miss it. Those that are born here, I think sometimes, I know this is a whole nother topic. We won't stay on this too long, but people that are born here have the tendency not to really see what the land of opportunity really is. They kind of see, I guess, they got so settled into this the daily challenges of life that they don't really see this as a land of opportunity, which it really is. And so, I think a lot of people that come here from other nations, they thrive because they see that there's so much potential here, and that's why they come here, because they see the potential and they make the most of it. So that's interesting, and
Yeah.
it's very interesting that what you've just stated was very common to a lot of folks that come here from other countries. So
Yeah,
that's cool, man.
absolutely. That's a great point. And I think, I love what you just said. And I think that's maybe like the thing we don't often realize, that both things can be true at once, right? Like this can be the land of opportunity and be an incredibly flawed country at the exact same time. And
True.
that's,
Yeah.
that's okay. And I think that's sort of what I'm learning now, to just not only just empathize with people, but understand that like, gosh, I'm so grateful for this country, but I also know it's not perfect.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No place is
Exactly,
perfect for sure.
exactly. That
But
same logic literally applies to everything. But I do want to know, just sort of like, what do you I'm curious to sort of like your transition from the Bahamas to here, and I know some of your family is still there. Just sort of like, what's one memorable thing you remember about like the transition?
the transition for me was, it's this is kind of very surface level, but
Yeah.
as a kid, I always wanted to play football, right? And so American football. So we lived in the Bahamas at the time. We didn't have American football. We had, the Bahamas was a part of the British Commonwealth, but we had our independence, but still we were a part of the Commonwealth. So, it was, soccer or football, what they were called. And I remember as a kid, I was like, because when we moved down there, I said, man, I want to move back to the States so I could play football. And so one day my parents said, my older sisters were graduating from high school. And my dad made a strategic decision to say it would be a whole lot cheaper for us to go to school in the States and living in the States. So he said, and my mom's from the States. So we moved
Mhm.
back so that, my sisters can go to college, because it'll be super expensive to kind of go to college. And we had 5 of us. And so my dad's
Yeah.
like, oh, what's the best way to do this? Let's move back to the States. So when we moved back here, I just wanted to play football, man. So So I
That
was
was literally
happy.
all that was on your mind.
I was all on my mind. I just want to play football. But the biggest transition for me was definitely cultural. Um, but yeah, I already had cousins in the States, so I kind of had an idea of how people live and so forth. Um, but when I moved here, Bahamas being predominantly African American, not African, but people from Africa living in the Bahamas, and it's not a whole lot of whites. So it was a lot. When I moved to Maryland, it was a lot more whites, and so that was kind of a big uh, uh, change for me.
Yeah.
And actually, to be honest, that was the first time I experienced racism.
Wow.
First time
Do you
experiencing
know that's what it
racism.
was? Like, that's what was happening?
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just there were some kids at school, and like granted, most of the kids that I played with were cool.
Yep.
When it was black, whites, we all kind of got together, but there was a few in the midst that were just weren't cool. And I had a teacher
Mm.
that was big time racist. He was a science
Wow.
teacher, and I was doing well in all my science classes. So in his particular class, I remember going up to him and say, "Hey, I don't understand this thing that you're teaching." And he just looked at me and said, "So?" And that was
Wow.
it. See, sit back down.
You're the teacher.
So
Teach
yeah, the
me.
teacher, right? So I was like, "Dang, I,
Wow.
wow!" So that was kind of my biggest experience to racism, moving from the Bahamas to here.
Yeah.
But
You know,
other
I
than that, it
think
was great
that
experience, though.
yeah, there's a lot of things like that, like you just mentioned, like that I don't think people think about that immigrants have to figure out. Like, I remember coming to the States and not knowing how to play football, and people explaining to me, well, like it's 10 yards, and then this is a quarterback, and this is how, just like understanding, like learning what football is, which is such a big part of American culture. Imagine just
Hmm.
having to do that with everything, right? Like, well, no, this is how you catch the school bus. It meets you here. And, so it was a big culture shift for sure.
Yeah. But since then, though, hey, I've been here since '76, so I'm pretty much
Wow.
a full blown U.S. citizen. I mean,
Yeah.
and the culture and all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about podcasting. So for those that are listening, and not everybody knows about podcasting, because I knew about it, but I've never really got deeper into it until like recently. But what is podcasting? What is a podcast?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I think the simplest way to explain a podcast is just radio on demand. Everything that radio is, podcasting is, except you can listen to it at any specific time. So, say for instance, you love the Steve Harvey Morning Show, which is a radio show. The same exact thing exists in the world of podcasting. Like the Steve Harvey Show is also a podcast. And so you could open up your phone, listen to every single episode every single day at any given time that you wanted. The word podcast itself comes from the word iPod and the word broadcast, and they just pushed it together. And so the
Uh,
idea is that you can listen to content on your phone, mobile device, tablet, or computer at any given time. And generally speaking, it's just audio only. In the future, it'll also include video, but for now, a large majority of podcasts are audio.
Aha, that's very good, man. Very good. So that's interesting. So yeah, that does make sense. The radio on demand. Um,
Yeah. And, I think people also maybe don't know what podcasts are, but participate in podcasts. For example, my mom loves Steve Harvey. She's always like sending me his clips. She loves Kirk Franklin, anything spiritual, TD Jakes. She sends me all their stuff. And she doesn't think that she listens to podcasts, but that the videos that she'll be sending me are podcasts, right? So it's like, I think a large group of people consume podcasts, but just don't know that those are podcasts. They just may think that this is a YouTube clip or this is
yeah.
a social media clip, but those in fact are podcasts.
So true. Yeah. I mean, I call mine a podcast. I mean, I'm mainly on YouTube, but that's
Right.
getting ready to change. I'm going to actually start taking advantage of some of the podcasting platforms. But yeah, I mean, I got started out just posting things on YouTube, and so
Yeah.
it is a podcast, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to know, since you've been posting on YouTube, how has it been going? Do you feel like anything, like what would you say is like the biggest thing you've learned since you started posting on YouTube?
I think the biggest thing is consistency. One thing about putting out content is that you have to be consistent with it because it's interesting, and I'm my viewers and my listeners are my subscribers are growing. I'm still relatively small, but they expect content to be
Yeah.
out there weekly. I put it out weekly right now, and eventually it may do more than maybe once a week, but right now weekly. And so I think the key thing is making sure I'm like, I want to make sure that I put out something every week, whether it's, full form or short form. I want to make sure that I'm continuing engaging with those subscribers because they're not necessarily looking for what was already published. They're
Mhm.
subscribing because they want to know more about what's going on, right?
Right.
So if you don't put content out there, then they're gonna get frustrated. So I definitely
Right.
want to be consistent as far as outputting content. So that's kind of been my biggest thing right now. And then I think, and as I mentioned before, I want to get better at automating things because right now it's brute force and it requires a lot of time, and I don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things I want to automate so I can expand and grow and really put
Yeah.
more effort into marketing and getting out there because
Yep.
that's I haven't really spent a whole lot of time, pushing my content through
Mhm.
marketing means.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think in that vein, I feel like that is probably like the biggest thing. I think when it comes to podcasting, I think people underestimate how much like consistency matters. And that is like the one thing I've learned about like podcast listeners. They love like consistency because I think they're habits of creature. And so, for instance, I know that every single Wednesday when I drive to work, there's a specific podcast I listen to during that specific time. Like that's my Wednesday podcast, right? And so,
Hmm.
say that Wednesday podcast decided that they want to release on Thursday or Saturday, that wouldn't necessarily work for me in that specific week because I only listen to that podcast on Wednesday. On Thursday, I listen to more political podcasts, and on Saturday, I don't drive, right? So, I do
Yeah,
think that, being able to expect like podcast listeners come to expect something, and that in itself is a really like that is a really important thing because like the idea that someone is going to be waiting for 30 minutes worth of content every single week, not too many other forms of content can give you that level of commitment from like a guest or a follower. I mean, you think about TikTok, people are willing to give you like 3 seconds before they decide if it's
yeah,
valuable, and then if it is, maybe 30 seconds, but
yeah.
30 minutes, like that's incredible.
That is. And that's one of the things that I'm always scratching my head because I'm looking at when I listen to podcasts, these are fairly long format shows. I mean,
Right.
and I'm like, but I'm listening there, I'm spending time listening and because it's interesting. And so, like you said,
Yeah.
if you're interested, you're gonna listen, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour. So that's the fascinating thing because a lot of people have these short attention spans,
Right.
like for example TikTok. But I am blown away about how people are actually listening for longer periods of time for particular podcasts. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's so much harder to build an audience when it comes to podcasting. But once you do get someone, the fact that they're willing to give you 30 minutes to an hour every week, that's powerful.
That is for sure. So how did you get into podcasting? Because you're relatively new to the scene, but I mean, you come across as knowing all things in this area, man. And I think you started like in 2018, 2017.
That's exactly right. So
Yeah.
I started consuming podcasts in 2016. I created my first podcast in 2018. And then I started creating content online, encouraging other people to start their podcast in 2021. So
Wow.
it's relatively new. It hasn't even been a year yet. And I mean, I'm so grateful for some of the opportunities that have come up. Like this, next week, I'll be in LA for a week filming a podcast course on behalf of LinkedIn. And so
Wow.
there's just like a lot of great opportunities that have come up in terms of content creation. And I just want to say, like, that is like the number one reason I encourage every single person listening right now. Please start creating content because you have no idea who's going to see it. You have no idea who God is going to push it in front of. You have no idea what impacts how that's going to ripple. The number of people that reach out to me and ask me if I'm looking for a job, the number of people that reach out and say, hey, we have this opportunity, just because they saw a video is just like, that's bizarre, right? So I think this is like us taking power and being able to take control of like our narrative and how we tell our story. And so it's really powerful. So I started listening to podcasts 2016, created my own in 2018, and then sort of started doing the work I'm doing now in 2021.
Wow. So what triggered you to get started and actually produce your own? Was it just wanted to express your voice about certain things, or what was that trigger? What inspired you to do that?
Yeah, I knew podcasting was going to be special in 2016 because when I started consuming, I was at a terrible job that was very, very bad. Like my boss was, I would literally go into the bathroom and cry every lunch break. That's how bad it was.
What?
So the way that I would like make the time pass by is I would get there like 8 a.m., start listening to podcasts. And the podcast I was listening to at the time was the Dave Ramsey podcast. And I think he has like maybe like 100,000 hours. It's like some insane number because they
Yeah.
do 3 hours a day. So literally, I'd get there at 8 a.m. I'd listen all day till 5 p.m., then go home. And that's what would make the day go by fast. And so that's when it hit me that podcasting is the only medium where I could listen to something while working my job that's also educating me, but also is free. Right. So it's like I couldn't do that with TV, right? Like that, I couldn't let that be visible. Couldn't
Yeah.
do that with YouTube, right? Because those videos are short, they're like 10 to 15 minutes. Podcasting is the only thing that had 8 hours worth a day of content that you could listen to and still work and completely free and educates you. So there's just no other medium like it in terms of value for value. So I knew at some point I wanted to start one. In 2018, when I decided to start one, it didn't necessarily matter what it was about. I just knew I had to start creating and start practicing and getting better. And so that's what led me to start.
Wow. Yeah, I was in the same, kind of the same situation. I started back in 2019,
Yeah.
um, right around when the pandemic, and the end of 2019. I just felt like it was, and I'm the type of person that I'd rather not say a whole lot. I like to kind of be behind the scenes. Definitely don't want to be in front of the camera. Definitely don't want to say anything. That's the introvert part of me.
Right.
But I felt like the Lord was kind of pushing me to say, just do it. Because
Yeah.
I like to plan things. I like to, well, this has got to be in place. This has got to be in place. This has got to be in place before I can get started. And then I'll just
Yeah.
get so many of these elements in place. Like, forget, I'm not doing anything. But I was like, say, do it now. I don't care. Just do it. So I
Right.
said, okay. I just pulled my cameras together and did it. And so,
Yeah.
so it's been a fun journey. It's been sometimes challenging, sometimes frustrating, sometimes discouraging, but overall, it's been great. Just meeting new people, like you said. I mean, you just never know who's watching. You just never know, how it affects folks. So it's
Yep.
been an awesome journey. And like I said, and the Lord kind of told me, He said, don't get caught up into the numbers. Don't worry about views. Don't worry about subscribers. Just continue to create the content and create
Yep.
create content that people can listen to and be inspired by and keep moving, and then
Yep.
everything else will fall into place. So that's kind of been my mindset over the last year or so.
Yeah, that's so important. And do you feel like, I, similar to you, I was always the behind the camera guy helping other people, just sort of like I'm a good like number two person to have help you. And so transitioning to the front was a bit different. But what was your experience sort of going from like behind the scenes to now like you have to share your opinion and your voice, right? And like how's that been for you?
Oh man, it's been, at first it was horrific. It was scary. It was like, oh man, I was stressed out
Yeah.
before I had to do an interview. I was just stressed. I'm like, what if I say something stupid? How am I gonna
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
dumb? All these things are going on in my mind as far as and then the voice saying you don't have any training in this. You don't even how you gonna ask questions to somebody. You don't really know much about this. It's all these different negative thoughts be
Yeah.
popping up in my mind. But I was like, I'm determined. I'm going to trust God, and I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
It's gotten better. It's gotten better. I still, before every interview, I'm always a little jittery about
Mhm.
it. But once I sit down and kind of think about who I'm interviewing, I do the research and I start building the questions, then I feel, a calm, and kind of God gives me the peace
Yep.
to kind of just go through it. But it was a struggle. It was a
Yeah.
really big struggle for me in the
Yeah.
beginning, and it still is even to this day. I would say that I'm not 100% comfortable, but that's a good thing. I think when you get too comfortable with things, you may get slack. So
Right.
anyway. How
I,
about
I,
you?
Yeah, I really resonate with that. And I think I agree with everything you said. And I think when I first started, I had to realize that it's okay to like suck at the beginning. It's okay to not be like great, right? Like we look at like I think people like you and I may be perfectionists in the sense that we look at like being bad at something as like non-negotiable or a non-starter. And so now doing something new and saying like, you know what, like I understand that this isn't going to be perfect all the time when I first start and being okay with that. There's a big learning curve and a challenge, but that I agree. Like the longer you do it, the better you get, and there's just so many blessings that come out of it.
True that. That's so true. So a person that wants to get started in podcasting, what are the simple steps? Nothing elaborate, just simple steps to get started. What do they need to do in order to get
Yeah.
started?
That's a great question. The easiest possible way to start a podcast right now is just to start to literally pull out your phone and start recording. The best way to do that is to download an app called Anchor on your iPhone or Android phone. This app will allow you to record with no microphone, no complicated software. You literally just pull up the app and there's a huge red button that says record. And so if you're doing a solo episode, which is just an episode by yourself with no guest or host, literally just pull out your phone, hit that record button and start talking. Now, when I tell people to start, like they always, have a number of questions. The first is like, I don't know what to talk about. And I always say, well, it sounds like you just got the first episode right there, right? It should be about the fact that you don't know what to talk about, right? Like who you are, why you're starting this, and that you don't know what you're doing. That's episode one, right? And so I think people like that. People want to go on this journey with you as you figure out what it is you want to talk
Yeah.
about. They want to understand the challenges you're facing. That is like podcasting, and that's the level of transparency that I think really sets people's podcasts apart. Anchor will also let you interview a co-host. So if you wanted to do it with a friend or communicate, just like you and I are chatting now, the Anchor app will literally let you like pull up the app. You can just invite your friend via text or email. They open the button, click the link, and they're in the app, and you guys are having a conversation, and it's recording the whole thing. It'll also let you just push it out to the Apple Podcast app, Spotify app, Google app, all of the apps with one click of a button. So it's by far the easiest way to start.
That's good. Great tips. So you don't need to have all this elaborate equipment, lighting, and all that good stuff. You just get your phone out, get the app, and rock and roll.
Absolutely. In fact, I think that that's better for people. I think naturally, especially people like me, like I love technology. So I'm more likely to say, well, I want to start a podcast, but I need a microphone. So let me save up for the microphone. And then I need a computer and headphones and software. And it's like, no, just like start today. Just do
Yeah.
your first 3 episodes. And then after that, you can decide if you want to buy a microphone or not.
Yeah, I'm that way. It's like, new piece of gear. Ooh, microphone X. Oh, that's cool. I have to get that. Oh, that
Yeah.
camera. Yeah.
Right. Same way. Gosh, I think part of it is I just love the technology, but it is very easy to say you need all these
Yeah.
things because you're afraid to start. But I agree. What, like when you started, how did you start?
Well, I already was into video production, so it was quite simple for me to. I already had the gear. Now, I think it was overkill. Like if you go back and look at my first episode, I did an episode interviewing a young lady about sexual trafficking, but I had a full blown production. I had three big full camera rigs, I had
Yeah.
lighting, I had wireless microphones, and so I had it all set up. And then at the end of that, I was like, you know what? That's great, but I can't do that consistently every
Right.
week.
Right.
And then the pandemic hit, and so everybody went kind of the remote kind of things,
Yeah.
and so that kind of made things easier. But I do want to. I still I think for certain episodes that I do, I want to have that kind of that full blown effect of multiple cameras
Yeah.
when it's needed. But in most cases, I right now it's just I carry maybe one. If I have to do a field recording,
Hmm.
I'd carry two cameras and keep it really simple. Keep it a real simple kit, simple wireless mics, and because I don't want to. Because normally it's just me doing it by myself, so I have to go over there, set up the gear, test it, and then do the interview.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time finagling through all these different setups, all these different cameras. Because
Yeah.
the person, I got to be respectful of their time too. That, you know, they're sitting there waiting on me to get this stuff set up. So I
Right.
try to keep things really packaged. But a lot of my things, a lot of my interviews now are just done through, you know, I use StreamYard, for example,
Yeah.
as a way to do it. My friend tells me, "You're lazy. Get out there and talk to people."
Well, you when you were doing it in person, like
Yeah.
where were you doing it? Were you going to their location,
Yeah.
your location, or
Both. I would go to their location and set up and shoot. And something like I said, I was doing it by myself. Sometimes I'll bring in,
Mhm.
you know, people to help out.
Yeah.
And where it warrants, like if I think that their location, like I did one a few weeks back where it was a bike shop, Bearings Bike Works.
Mm,
I wanted to be in their location because what they
yeah.
were doing in the community was awesome. And so I wanted to kind of give that the look and feel of being inside that
Yeah.
space, and so people can see the bikes and the
I love
workbenches and
that.
stuff like that.
You
So I
gotta
thought
send me
that
that
was,
one. I gotta check that out.
yeah, yeah, it was great. They're doing a great thing in the community. And so I wanted to really experience that environment, have the viewer and the listener to be in that environment where they're actually you know, making a difference in the community. So
Yeah.
in those cases, they warrant me physically being there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in other cases, it's, you know, when people are out of town or out of state, like in your case, then we just do it, you know, through virtually. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask you about something that I've been seeing, or that I hope I'm going to start seeing, which is that like every industry seems to be moving into podcasting full speed. But an industry I haven't quite seen move as fast is like churches, right? Like I think in the future, every church is going to have a podcast. Great way to recap and connect with people during the week. Great way to connect with different audiences. I actually have a friend based out of New York, and all they do is create like content, like stories, podcast stories for kids, right? So now when you're in the car, your kids have something to listen to. I think the same will exist in like the Christian world too. But what's your thought on just sort of like the Christian landscape, specifically churches and, you know, their podcasts?
Yeah, I think you're right. I know, you know, the church that I'm with right now, they're starting to put out more and more content, but it's been mainly YouTube based. And I've
Mm,
seen a lot of individuals putting out content, you know, Christians that are putting out content through YouTube, which
mm,
has been great because it's
yeah,
like, you know, wow, it's a flurry of just great content about, you know,
yeah,
your Christian walk and applications and scenarios and testimonies. So I think I think you're right. I think the churches, if they haven't, they will, because people are, you know, people's viewing and listening habits are constantly changing.
yeah.
You know, people, you know, back in the old days, you know, used to have churches will broadcast on your traditional stations, right? They'll
Hmm.
have Sunday morning, you'll see them on, I don't know, channel 2, channel 5. And then when the internet came about, you know, you started having people having the dedicated stream services,
Mm,
which you still see a little bit
yeah,
of. But I think you're right. I think there needs to be a space in there where churches can take advantage of all the other things that are going on
yeah,
in community that are outside the traditional message.
right.
And so I definitely think that's going to be something that we'll see more of. But I know
Yeah.
that individuals are taking advantage of that as we speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Not obviously there's a lot more opportunity, I think, for people of color, especially Black people right now. About 36% of Black people consume podcasts. By the way, 59% of that 36% of people have said that they would listen to more podcasts if there were more Black hosts.
Hmm.
You know, over the next 5 years, I think that's exactly what we'll start to see.
Well, that's exciting, man. That's
Yeah.
exciting, and it needs to be that. I think every group should have a voice, right?
Yep.
And so anyone that has something to share, an experience or a culture, I think that's a good thing because I
Yeah.
think the challenge we have right now, we've been kind of like isolated in this kind of this divide where people kind of, I'm over here, I'm Republican, I'm Democrat, I'm black, I'm white, I'm purple,
Yep.
I'm green. When people start sharing, you know, their perspective, I
Yep.
think that ushers in more of an opportunity to discuss
Yep.
and relate and hopefully, you know, bridge those gaps so that we can kind of get to know each other better and listen to, you know, the perspective, because I think sometimes we get so caught up into our own world that we're not willing to listen to or at least experience the worlds of others to get a better you know, get a better understanding of how other people's views are. You may not necessarily agree with them, but if you can
Yep.
at least understand
Right.
and mutually disagree, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But
Right.
I think with the podcasting platform, I think that's an awesome opportunity for that to be the tool, the resource that people can use and grow and hopefully come together.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I agree. Yeah, and that's like the beautiful thing about it. Like the podcast industry is still so early and still so young that we kind of get to choose and try and make it whatever we want it to be in the future.
Yeah, you're right, man. And like I said, I've heard about podcasts before, but I never thought about
Yeah,
doing it. And
yeah,
now I'm in the midst of it, and I know that I want to do more in it because it's now that I've kind of. It's funny because when you mentioned that when we spoke a few weeks back, and you kind of shared some of the things that you gave me some links and so some resources. I've been kind of like digging deep into it. I've been
yeah,
listening to your podcast. I found new other people that are doing podcasts, and it's been awesome. I mean, when I'm at work now, I put my earplugs in and I'm typing away and listening
right.
and so forth. I'm listening to financing, spiritual growth,
Yeah,
business, entrepreneurship, all these things that are out there. I mean, so
yeah,
much wealth of knowledge. So
right.
it's been an awesome and a great experience. So thank you, man, for sharing those links because it's been a fun journey.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I just, that's like my number one thing. Like, I just can't believe that all of this is free. Like, the idea
Yeah, it's
5 years
free.
ago that you could listen to Dan Cathy talk to someone about how he started his business for completely free whenever you want. And you can do that with any entrepreneur in the world, as many hours as you want for
Yeah,
completely free.
yeah.
It's very crazy to me.
It's crazy, but I love it.
Yeah, same here, same here.
So let's briefly talk about purpose. God Dreamers is all about finding and fulfilling your God given purpose. So in your case, what do you think about that? You feel like you're actually operating in your purpose and your calling right now through you sharing? I think you've already kind of answered that question, but I'll restate it anyway. But you feel as though what you're doing now is kind of where God wants you to be in terms of your calling.
Yeah, I do. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to accept is the fact that I think that um, things change, right? And things ebb and flow. And
For
in
sure.
this specific season of my life, I think I'm doing exactly what God wants me to be doing. And I think I don't necessarily look at it as like, I do believe in like serving people, right? And that's why like God gives us purpose. But I also believe that like some of the things that we are doing are also just as beneficial and teach us just as much as maybe God wants us to be teaching other people. So, for example, what I've been trying to do over the last few months has just been trying to empower as many people as possible to start a podcast. And so now I find that most of my audience is predominantly Black, and a lot of my audience traditionally does not have access to the information that they need to start a podcast. And so here I come along saying, hey, I have all of this information. I'm reading the newsletters. I'm reading the articles. I'm going to do as much research as I can and give you the information that you need to start your podcast. And I hope that that triggers you on your own journey and your own purpose. So in that way, I'm like serving them. But what I've also found from this journey is, it's a great experiment for me to go on this journey with God, and I learn just as much about myself. And I get just as blessed by trying to help as many people as I can through this medium of podcasting.
That's
A case
great.
in point is just like belief, right? So like when I first started with, a great example of this is like TikTok, right? I started posting content on there on TikTok, and I was like, every single day for the rest of this year, I'm going to post 2 videos a day on TikTok. That is like my commitment to like this platform. And so I sort of was getting frustrated by the fact that it wasn't working, right? And so I got to this point where I sort of had to let go and just sort of trust that, like, okay, like God, I'm believing that you're going to get this out to the right people at the right time. And I'm acknowledging that there's, outside of recording it and just doing what I should do, there's nothing else I can do. Like after I put it out, it's in your hands. And this is like my faith exercise of just believing that you're going to get it where it needs to get. And so that to me is like a great example of like, oh, great. Like I'm doing this content thing, which I hope helps other people. But these are some of the ways that God is also like challenging me and growing me and helping me grow. And just some of the amazing things that have happened just in doing some of those like belief exercises and trusting God have just been like amazing, incredible, and such a blessing to me.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. We have to remind ourselves that things don't happen overnight. Even
Right.
those that have those podcasters that have multi-million views or downloads or so forth. I mean, that stuff just didn't happen overnight. It took time. And so we have to have patience and just keep, like you said, keep putting out content, keep putting it out there,
Yeah.
and not worry about so much, like I said before, the numbers, don't worry so much about that. Just keep continuing to create the content, and God will open up the doors at the
Yeah.
right time, at the right place for you to grow. And I think
You're
the
so right.
obedience part is just be obedient and keep doing it.
Yeah, you're so right. I was just telling Ash, I constantly find myself in positions and scenarios where I don't think I should be, where I don't feel like I belong, right? Where it's very clear that you, out of all the people here, you're here maybe because like God got you this opportunity, because just alone on merit, maybe you wouldn't be here, right? And so I think that, and I like that. Like I like sort of feeling like, you can create a piece of content, you can create a podcast episode. God is going to get it to the right people. And someone may see that thing and say, like, hey, I want that person on a panel. And I kind of think that's been sort of like the theme of like my life, right? Even with like college, right? Like I didn't get a college degree, but it just happenstance. I'd meet the right person. They say, let me introduce you to this person. And that's how like I'd get my next job, right?
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that specifically when it comes to content, a lot of it is like out of our control. And a lot of it really requires that like you trust God for him getting it out to the right people, with the right people seeing it, and having some of those like impacts.
That is so true. I mean, my whole life has been all about how God has opened doors and closed doors. It was nothing that I did. I mean, there was some prep time, right? There was some
Yep.
prep time of you building a skill, excuse me, studying and so forth. But there was nothing that I did that allowed those doors to open. If that makes any sense to you, it's almost like it was God kind of worked it out at the right time in the right place for those doors to open up.
Yeah.
And so I think the key thing is just like you said, just keep doing it, keep pressing on, keep doing it. Just trust God that the right person at the right time is going to see it, and then when it happens, you're ready. You'll step right into it,
Right.
prepared. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's a great, so well put.
So what's next for you? I know. So currently you have a podcast out, which is I think what's the name of it?
It's called Thoughts from a Content
Plus from a
Creator.
content creator, yeah.
Yep.
And then you just embarked on a new thing, and I think it's the Creative Hub.
Yep.
So
Um,
what share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of opportunities that exist for creators. So, for example, there's a program called the HubSpot Creator Program, and basically, what this program does is it takes people that are starting a podcast from scratch, no listeners, no anything. I think like when they first released it, you didn't even have to have one episode out. You could just have an idea, and basically, if they like the idea, you can apply to get in this program, and they basically give you $1,000 a month
What?
continuously just for you to create your podcast, and they invest in you for like marketing. So if you say like, hey, I'm going to spend $500 in marketing, they double that. So there's just like, it's this amazing program that you can apply to get into. And there's like several programs just like that. There's one by LinkedIn called the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator. And basically, if you get into this program, they give you like $15,000 upfront to invest in like your creator journey, right? And it's not
Wow.
like they're taking ownership. It's not like they're doing anything. They're just trying to help creators. And so the problem that I was seeing was that a lot of the people around me that were creators didn't know about these programs. And so what I did is I created a newsletter called Creator Hub, where every week we send out a newsletter with the most important things that you need to know as a creator. Sometimes this is just news saying, hey, this is what's happening in the podcasting industry. Other times it's opportunities like, hey, you should apply for this program if it's up your alley. So that's what the newsletter is. Anyone can subscribe by going to bigcreator.energy, and you can subscribe.
That's awesome, man. Because that's wow. I'm gonna check that out. And I did subscribe to to the program. So
Yep.
I've been getting some newsletters from you. So it's been great. Good
Awesome.
stuff. So how can people find out more about you and what you're doing, and also to utilize some of your service? Because I know you have some ways to help people and some programs to help folks. So how can they
Yeah.
find more about you?
Absolutely. So people can check out my website, and that is lloydnotgeorge.com. My first name is Lloyd, last name is George. So people always call me George, so I just figured I'd simplify it.
I was
So
going
it's
to
just
ask you about that.
lloydnotgeorge.com.
I love that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, man, well, Lloyd, thank you so much for hanging out with us today and sharing so much wealth of knowledge in podcasting. I mean, it's been great, and I'm excited about what you shared. And I want to implement some of those things that you mentioned as well to kind of expand what I'm doing here. But thank you so much for being a part of God Dreamers.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation.
Yeah, awesome, awesome, man. So anyway, folks, if you like what we're doing, please subscribe, share, let folks know. Because we love doing what we do and we love sharing your stories. So if you know of anyone or if you have a story that you want to share, please reach out to us and let us know because we would love to interview you and get your story heard, and so others then may be inspired to do the same thing. So anyway, until next time, you guys take care. God bless. We'll see you.